multi-touch attribution. What is it and how does it work?
And the idea is that back then, everything was measured according to last click.
Attribution is a main challenge for Amazon sellers. Why is it so difficult to track?
So Amazon doesn't know what else is going on in the rest of the world.
So from where are you getting all this data from in order to predict?
There's three sources of data inputs that come into our model.
How can sellers measure the impact of external traffic?
Ecom Squeezed podcast.
Welcome back to Ecom Squeezed. I am your host, Sebastian, founder of Retail-Outsource. Today, we have a special guest joining us to discuss a special topic, marketing attribution in the age of privacy. Our guest, Jeff Greenfield, is a marketing attribution expert with over 30 years of experience. He is the co-founder and CEO of Provalytics, an AI-driven cookieless attribution platform designed to help sellers and business to measure their marketing effectiveness in a privacy-first world. In this episode, we'll be covering Amazon advertising and attribution, data-driven ad optimization and budgeting, AI-driven attribution, and the future of marketing measurement. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you, Sebastian. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So could you just give us a background? You have 30 years of experience, right? So you have seen it all from the very starting to where we stand now. So could you just give us a basic overview?
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I'd love to say that I planned for it to happen the way it did, but I ended up in the digital ecosystem primarily because of I was shifting from one business experience to another. I knew I needed a website. This goes back to the mid-90s, and hired a company to make a website for me, and they were unable to do it because things were brand new back then. Interestingly enough, I hired the newspaper. The local newspaper was advertising. They were making websites, and after a month and a half, all they were able to do was to buy a domain name. So I had to go buy Microsoft Front Page and teach myself how to do it out of desperation. And that kind of started my digital journey, if you will. And it started with websites. It led into building out one of the first SaaS SEO platforms. And then being on kind of all sides of both the digital and traditional marketing, to finally I got to this point in the mid-2000s where the numbers just weren't adding up for a lot of the clients I was working with. They were questioning whether their agencies were kind of messing with the numbers or were the numbers not to be trusted, because the whole idea behind digital marketing versus traditional is that, well, everything can be tracked, so it should add up. But very quickly, things did not add up. I mean, if you're just in one channel, like if all you're doing is buying Meta, or you're only on Amazon, well, things probably will add up. But as you start to expand and you're in other channels to drive sales, whether just in Amazon or off Amazon, whether it's in retail, the numbers just don't seem to add up. And that is what kind of led me to the measurement space. And I first built one of the first multi-touch attribution companies, primarily for enterprise, back in 2008. I scaled that company up and exited right before the pandemic in 2019. And then I thought I was done with measurement, didn't know what I was going to do. And then all of a sudden there was this massive shift towards privacy. Privacy became number one, and it majorly impacted the advertising ecosystem. First with the big change with Apple, the iOS update that everyone is familiar with, the fear that Chrome was going to get rid of cookies, and then all of the regulation, but also at the same time, the walls went up. We now have more walled gardens than we have open web. And so the world of measurement is kind of choked off, if you will. You can't use that privacy, the user level data. It's no longer available. And the truth is it was never available in the Amazon ecosystem. Amazon always held itself out. In the early days, Amazon did allow our tag to be there. We were able to capture data from Amazon, but it was very short-lived. But now it's not available anywhere. And so in 2022, I saw an opportunity to leverage some of the faster computers that are out there, the ones that are generating all of the AI now. You see there's a lot of investment going towards new chips to speed up the computers, because with faster computers, you can do things that used to take over a year. You can do it now maybe a day, which is pretty amazing. And so we're able to do the same stuff with less data, which is unbelievable. We're able to provide detailed, actionable insights without even getting user level data. The math is able to complete the dots for us, which is absolutely positively incredible. So it's an exciting time for measurement because we're living in a world where we don't have to get user level data. We don't have to violate privacy, but we can measure just about everything and let marketers have confidence in the decisions and the next moves they make, which is very exciting.
True. One quote comes to my mind, if you can't measure, you can't improve. I saw it somewhere on LinkedIn, so that came to mind. So, measurement is very important.
Oh, it's everything. You're 100% correct.
Yeah. And to follow up on, the point that you mentioned about multi-touch attribution, could you explain to the viewers what is it and how does it work?
Yeah, so multi-touch attribution was like the exciting development as the open web started to grow, like around 2008, 2009. And the idea is that back then everything was measured according to last click, the last action, whatever action was closest to the sale. And that's how still, oddly enough, that's still how most marketers measure. But multi-touch attribution, the idea was, well, we don't just have to look at the last touch, we may be able to look at the first touch as well. And we can look at all of the touches in the middle. And then we can apply an algorithm to let the math tell us how much credit. So it's all about dividing the credit up. Instead of giving credit to just one player on the field, divide it up based upon their level of involvement. The only caveat with that is that you have to collect every click, which we can do because clicks usually come to the website, but you also have to collect every impression. And that's where you can't do it these days. So it required collecting 100% of not only your first-party data, but also your third-party data as well, and having a unique identifier throughout so you could stitch it together and create like this trail of clicks and impressions. So it was pretty amazing. And the cool thing about it was that it gave marketers very granular insights. It would tell you where to spend more and where to spend less, not just spend X% more in search. It would say spend 2.5% more in this campaign ad group keyword match type, that level of detail, which is a huge distinction from what was around before, which was marketing mix modeling, which only gave you channel level insights, but multi-touch attribution gave you that granularity, but you had to collect everything. And that's when privacy came along. We can kind of kick that to the curb. It's not available anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's great. And in terms of Amazon, attribution is a main challenge for Amazon sellers. Why is it so difficult to track attribution? And as you mentioned at the starting, it limits within each selling platform, right? So it's very hard to measure what comes from outside. So how difficult is that for Amazon sellers to measure it?
It's really difficult because you have to understand how people buy and how they learn about products. If your philosophy is that people come to Amazon and the only people that buy my product are people that come to Amazon and search for certain keywords, then in your mind, you're not going to have an issue. But you have to step back and pan the camera back to look at the fact that Amazon is a store. Okay, it's a store that pretty much has everything. And what's happened is that, especially in the US, is that if you go back 5 years ago, when someone heard about a product or a service, they would go to Google and search for it. And then there would be an ad for Amazon, and then they would click, and then they would go to Amazon. And pretty much every single person in the US probably did that about 30 times over the last 5 years. And after about maybe for some people, the 5th time, for other people, the 30th time, they said, hey, maybe I should just search Amazon each time. And that's what's happened is that people go and they search Amazon when they hear about a product, a friend tells them about it, or they see an ad. But you see, that's the key here is that Amazon is the destination, okay? It's a destination where people go to buy. But what I said is that when they hear about a product or they see an ad, so there's some action that's driving someone into Amazon. Now, it may be I have stuff on subscription and Amazon sent me a note because something's not available, and I go in and I see and they give me alternatives or other suggestions, which happen to be Amazon ads. But why did I have that subscription in the first place? Because of a product or a service that I heard about. So the reason attribution is so difficult is that Amazon is this closed ecosystem. So if I buy ads there, Amazon's going to give me all those details on those ads. But they're not going to tell me the ads that I have outside of Amazon, how those are working, driving people in. So for example, for like some larger brands, they're buying television ads, they're buying radio, CTV, podcast advertising, and people see the ad and they have on there their website, and then they also say available on Amazon. So some people go to the website, some people go to Amazon. Can they tell which people individually are going there? Absolutely not. Does Amazon even know if they're advertising on TV? No, they don't know. So it doesn't show in those results. And that's the issue. It's the same issue that people have who aren't on Amazon that are buying pay-per-click on Google, and they decide, hey, I'm going to buy some Facebook. Google Analytics doesn't know that you're buying Facebook. They have no idea. So Amazon doesn't know what else is going on in the rest of the world. And so as a result, the numbers you get inside of there are somewhat skewed because it doesn't contain everything that it could, if you will.
Yeah, that's a good point. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of different points that we need to connect them.
Right.
And on your website, I saw about predictive attribution. Does it come into play on this scenario, right? I assume.
It does. And this is one of the most important things is that every business has an approach that they use to determine what ads are working and what ads are not working. It all goes back to that famous John Wanamaker statement that marketers like to talk about. Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The problem is I don't know which half. And that's always been that's the plague that we all face as marketers. But all marketers have a methodology that they use. And the problem with that methodology is that it's never back tested. They never go backwards to see how well things predicted. They may say, if I spend X, I'm going to get Y in terms of sales. And if that number doesn't work, they go back and they adjust it. And so in order for things to be predictive, what you actually have to do is hold back the information. What we do at Provalytics, the way that we back test things is we use a technique from machine learning called K-fold. It's a way to validate a model. And so when you think about, from a marketing standpoint of view, you're spending dollars and you're buying eyeballs, you're buying impressions. And so every day there's so many impressions that are in market. So for us at Provalytics, the data inputs that we have is how many impressions there are, and then how many sales or orders you have. That's kind of your conversion event, is your KPI. So with K-fold, what we do is we actually tell the model, hey, for this particular day, these were the impressions, and this is how it broke down. So many on Amazon, so many in display on Amazon, so many sponsored products, so on and so forth. And then we say to the model, but I'm not going to tell you what the actual sales were. You have to predict. And then the model comes and makes a prediction. And then we compare that to what the actual numbers were. And we do that for every single day so that we're transparent. And we can say, hey, the model is predicting better than 90%. And why do we do it? Yeah. And the reason we do that is because we want marketers to feel confident. Now, here's the secret about this approach. The secret is that sometimes the model is predicting like much lower than 90%. Like sometimes all of a sudden it's like at 75%, which is still amazing. But when you have something that's normally predicting at 90 and then all of a sudden it's down in the 70s, what does that tell us? It tells us, did the model change? No, the model doesn't change. The model is static. The model's always learning. But what it tells us is the data that went into the model is wrong. That's what it says, is that concept of garbage in, garbage out. You put bad data in, you're going to get bad results. So whenever we see something that doesn't look right, we start to examine the data and we find, and for those of you who are listening who look at your data on a daily basis out of Amazon, sometimes you'll pull data for yesterday and then the next day you'll pull it again and you'll see some differences because as they're creating real-time insights and real-time data, there's always mistakes that happen. They have to adjust for fraud and things like that. So sometimes when we get data pushed to us, sometimes it's wrong. So we have to go back and reanalyze and redo that data. But yes, the whole idea behind a predictive model is that you have something that is predicting at a level where you say, wow, if I had $1 million, I would use that money to invest in the stock market if it could predict that as well. And that's the key, is you want something that predicts really, really well.
And for this prediction, I think you have to input a lot of data, right? You mentioned about good data. So from where are you getting all this data from in order to predict?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's 3 sources of data inputs that come into our model. Our model is a daily model because it's not user level. So we get from our clients daily aggregated marketing data. So when we talk about like campaign, ad group, keywords, so whatever level of granularity they want, we take in at that level of granularity how much they spent, how many impressions there were, and if they're clicks, how many clicks. And I say if they're clicks because things like connected television, podcast advertising, out of home, regular television, there's no clicks associated with that. So that's the stimulus, if you will, the data that's coming in. The second component is what we would call an engagement component. This is if they have an owned and operated website, this would be how many visitors or sessions there are each day to that website. If they have a call center, that would also include how many calls that are coming into that call center. If they have a retail store and they're tracking foot traffic and they have that available, that would include how many people are walking into each location every single day. That's engagement, because when we think about advertising, and let's just use Amazon, for example, one of the ways that obviously if we spend money on Amazon, I want to get more sales. But let's say it's a new product. It's a brand new category. Nobody knows about it. What's one of the first ways that we can tell that says, hey, our advertising is actually getting some interest, is that we can see visits on our product page. Because if I put up a new category product and my visits are 0, no one's going to find it. Once I optimize that page in Amazon, it may show up in some searches. But once I start advertising, one of the leading indicators is engagement. People are engaging with it. So we've got the marketing stimulus, we've got that engagement, and then finally are the conversions or the key performance indicators. And unlike a marketing mix where you're just looking at sales, like I said, there's sometimes leading indicators, like, for example, add to carts. How many people add a particular product to their cart? If that's available, that's a great leading indicator. How many orders are there? If they have an owned and operated site, what are the contents of the cart? For every person who buys, how many items are they ordering? How many cross-sells or upsells are there? And then finally, what is the actual revenue as well? All of these things are different types of KPIs that can come in. And then for clients that have a continuity program, a subscription program, what is that continuity revenue? What is the churn that's associated with that? So we can have multiple types of KPIs. Those are the inputs that come into the model. For our model, we don't take into account things like socioeconomic changes, like interest rate, the jobs rate, those types of things. Those types of things are better suited for a traditional marketing mix model. We do also bring in, if it's available for the client, competitive data, because it's important to see if you have no competitors in market, your ads may be killing it. And then all of a sudden you have competition, there may not be much differentiation. So your market share may start to decrease substantially. So we have a share of voice component where we can bring in that competitive data, and then you can start to see some of those differences there as well. Those are the only inputs that go into the model. There's no extra special type of data. So it's all data that the brand has available itself.
Great. And output you already mentioned. And the next question is, how can sellers measure the impact of external traffic? Amazon loves external traffic. They do a lot of advertising themselves, I assume. So how can they do that? Means how can they measure the external traffic?
That's a great question. I mean, realistically, the best way to do that is to use a platform like Provalytics, ones that looks across everything. But of course, I'm going to say that, but I don't want to leave listeners saying, well, of course, Jeff is going to say that. Like, can't you help me out, Jeff? Can you give me a little advice? And I can. The key is like Google Analytics isn't going to help you because Google Analytics is click traffic only and is only going to look at your owned and operated website. And so what you have to look at in order to understand this, the first thing that has to happen is you have to go through a kind of a paradigm shift in your mind about how advertising functions. Most marketers that have been working in this space for like the last 18 years or so, that come from strictly a digital background. They have a click-centric view of advertising. And what I mean by that is their philosophy is that the way advertising works is you invest dollars to buy clicks and clicks lead to sales, which is essentially last click. But that's how people think because people look at their Google sheet that they have on their desktop and they have their cost per click, their cost per sale, and it's all based upon clicks. But in all of those reports on Amazon, there's also a column called impressions, which is how many people and eyeballs you attempted to reach during that day. So what I would say for you to do is the way to get an understanding, because you already as a marketer know the relationship between clicks to sales on Amazon. The problem is that you're doing stuff off Amazon to drive people to learn about your product or service and buy on Amazon. And the only way to unite those things is you need to have a unified metric, and that unified metric is impressions. So take your Google sheet, add an additional column at the top right next to date called impressions. Because the way marketing actually functions is you invest dollars to buy attention. And that attention that you're buying is through eyeballs, which we call in the marketing world impressions. And impressions' job is to get attention and to build awareness. And when awareness is built to a certain enough level, people will walk into your store and they will buy. And walking into that store is coming to your product page or clicking on an ad on Amazon, adding to cart and buying on Amazon. And so if you take all of the impressions, and you need to do this by day for the last 12 months or as long as you've had data, if you do it for all of your on Amazon stuff and all of your off Amazon stuff, you're going to have this massive Google sheet. And now what you want to do is you want to create a graph that looks at by day daily impressions, and you want to correlate them with daily clicks and daily sales. And you're going to start to see, oh, wow, like this week, impressions were really up for like on Wednesday. And then I noticed the following Monday that sales went up and clicks went up on Amazon. And that's because people's lives, like most people, we don't live in the world of direct response TV. It used to be in direct response TV. There'd be an ad on TV for like this hose that magically solves all your gardening needs. And people would stop everything. They would say, honey, pick up the phone, call this number right now because the supply is limited and it's only available through this 800 number. That's what people did. People don't do that anymore. People have a short attention span. You have to put that message in there and repeat it over and over again. And it takes time to build that awareness up to where they actually drive them to action. And what you'll start to notice is that there's days when impressions were up, and a couple of days to maybe a week, even a week and a half later, you saw a rise in sales on Amazon that couldn't be correlated with anything else. Now you go back to those particular days and you dig into the particular campaigns and creatives that were running off Amazon and on Amazon, and then repeat. You just rinse and repeat. But first you have to analyze your data. But the secret is to find a unifying metric that you can compare in a spreadsheet, and it happens to be impressions, because that's where the attention starts. And that's really what marketing is all about, is driving attention and driving awareness to get people to buy your stuff.
So you recommend to focus on the top of the funnel, right?
Absolutely. 1,000%.
Okay. And in one of your podcasts, I hear you saying that, Google Analytics is not that great. Somewhat. Could you explain why you don't like Google Analytics?
Well, for people listening, the number one reason why I don't like Google Analytics is because you can search through Google Analytics. I have yet to see the Amazon tab or the Walmart tab or the Target tab. I haven't seen that. There's no tab there for podcasts, direct mail, or television. And really, Google Analytics should be called Google's Analytics,
True.
because how many people would expect, if they advertise on Facebook, that they would see Amazon advertising results in Facebook? You wouldn't see that, right? Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't see your Facebook results inside of Amazon, because Amazon is only reporting on what you're buying through them. Now, Google tries to say, hey, remember they used to call it Universal Analytics. It's universal. They gave it an acronym. It was GA. Now it's GA4. They want you to forget. What's crazy is that originally Google Analytics was Urchin, which was a web analyzer. It showed you how well people made their way across your website. And it does a really good job for website metrics, but it is really not designed for advertising. But it's great if all you're doing is buying Google. But if all you're doing is buying Google, you're really missing out on other places to be, especially if you're selling stuff or selling a service, because consumers are all over the place these days. Even if you're selling lawn care services, you need to be on Thumbtack and all these other places besides just Google. So that's the problem, is that GA4 is accepted universally by all of these brands, and yet people are everywhere and buying everywhere that Google cannot go. So I would say that GA4 is obsolete these days for most marketers, without a doubt. That's the big limitation with it, is that it's obsolete for today's world.
Got it. And within Amazon, Amazon doesn't provide the full customer journey. So how does Provalytics fill that gap? Basically, can a seller, if you sign up for the program, can the seller see the full journey within? I know it's predictive, but still, can they see the full full journey?
Well, the issue is no one has that full journey, not even Amazon, because in the scenario, if you're advertising off of Amazon, Amazon doesn't know the searches that they did in Google and everything they did in order to get to Amazon. Amazon only knows what they did as soon as they got there. I wouldn't be surprised if, over the next year or so, that Amazon starts producing some user journey maps, primarily because marketers like those. What I've seen, though, is that marketers never use them for decisioning. Marketers like those because most marketers have bosses, and those bosses require reports. And user journey maps look great in PowerPoints, but they're somewhat useless in terms of decision making, because what you end up seeing is, oh, wow, look, the average journey is taking 3 bullet points or clicking on 3 things. How do we get the people that are clicking on 7 things to only click on 3? And that's the problem, is that when you show that type of stuff to executives, they always want to know, how can I save money? How can I stop the people who can't make up their mind to get them to make up their mind sooner? And the answer is, you can't. You can't completely shift that around. Who knows, maybe a lot of those people, while they're buying, they're also having a text conversation, and they're on Facebook, and they're getting distracted and they lose their place. So they have to go back and restart their search on Amazon or they're making dinner at the same time. There's lots of things that go on inside that process, but we don't have the user journey as well, because we don't have that user level data. And so what we do is we provide back to the marketer actionable insights that help them make better decisions. We'll tell you at the seller level, essentially what campaigns, what ad groups, what creatives are working, and how much more you need to spend on a particular one and how much less you need to spend on another in order to increase your ROI and improve your sales. I'd say one of the biggest takeaways for Amazon, though, is the fact of the halo that we're seeing, that when you buy on Amazon, the impact it has off of Amazon. Because we talked about how you buy off Amazon to drive people to Amazon, but we're now seeing this other halo going the other direction, that Amazon ads. Someone's on Amazon, they're searching for a product, they click on your product page and they're like, oh, wow, I didn't know about this. This garden hose is amazing. But there's now a component of people that are saying, I wonder if they have their own website. And they're clicking and they're searching to find the website. And then now they have both open. Now they're doing some comparison shopping where they're looking at the price on Amazon and they're looking at the price on the website. And then they're making a decision where to buy. So this is a new behavior that we've started to see over the last 18 months. But Amazon, we're seeing for a lot of these omni-channel retailers, is lifting sales across the whole ecosystem for brands.
Great. And, for the Amazon attributes, I'm just going back to the attributes again. We can create a link, right, and give it to influencers and everything. They can put that on their website saying, okay, click on Amazon as you initially mentioned, but there will be another link as well for website. So if they click directly with that link on Amazon link, we know exactly they came from that attribution link and we can track it quite easily. But, they might not click on it straight away. They might see it, as you mentioned, right? They might decide it after 2 or 3 days. Normally if I purchase something on Amazon, I might not purchase it straight away. I will check how to video on YouTube, if it's like electronic and stuff like that. Then later on I will purchase. So there are a lot of researching stage, then the purchase happen. This is for like expensive items. So, there are a lot of complications over here and a lot of data points. So we can see all this information in that scenario on your website, Provalytics. We can see all those data, right, in that scenario.
Yeah, and I'll distill that down just a little bit. What you're talking about is the concept of an influencer who has a special link that if they click, it'll redirect, and then you're able to track that it came from John, who did an unboxing of the product, let's say, a very expensive product. But what ends up happening is that for products like that, that's the first part of the journey. And I'm doing a bunch of other research. And then when I finally make the decision to buy, I don't go back to John's video because I probably can't find it. Okay. I found it on TikTok and that started me on my journey. I'm going to go just back to Amazon. I'm now familiar with the brand. I'm familiar with the product. I'm going to search directly on Amazon. I'm going to click on the first thing I see, which is another ad. And then I'm going to buy because I'm ready to buy. So what you're going to see in Provalytics is that I don't care how many people clicked on John's link, because that is a small percentage of the people that he absolutely influenced. Because we know that what he's doing with his video and unboxing is that he's building awareness. And that awareness building can take a lot of time. It may take 45 days until you start to see sales from there. But what I want from John is I want to know how many video views were there every single day that the video's been up. That's a lot of work to get that, but there's some platforms that actually have the analytics on that. That data will go into our model. That data will inform us what the actual impact is from John's influence building and the awareness driving and how it worked people down the funnel. Because John, if someone just clicked right away and went all the way through and made a purchase, should John get 100% of that credit? Probably not. Because maybe that person who clicked actually saw Rachel's video 3 months ago. Okay? And so John is the last thing along the way. So again, this has to do with attribution, with splitting up the credit between the individual parts based upon who is driving the incremental value. And that's where that platform like Provalytics comes in to determine that. But for that, that's where we get those impressions.
And in last click attribution, you're not a big fan of it, right? So in that scenario, what all other attributes or other reports or other areas the sellers need to focus on? Is that the top of the funnel or branding and stuff like that? Could you please give us?
It's definitely top of the funnel, definitely impressions, because especially for items that are expensive, that are what we would call a considered purchase, that time frame for someone making that decision is not going to be minutes. It's going not to be hours. It could be weeks before they make a decision. Think about it. In the US right now, people are in market for a new car. It takes them 9 months to make a decision to buy. 9 months, okay? Now, a car is a very expensive item, but it's important to remember that that's a very long sales cycle. So think about it. And we'll use this as a great example. If you're an auto manufacturer and you know someone is 9 months away because their lease is going to expire within a year, what you want to do is hit them very heavy because you want to be in that consideration set. Like let's say you're Toyota and this person is driving a Ford, and you know that there's certain types of Ford drivers that you can get them over to Toyota. So you hit them really, really heavy. And so at 9 months, they're actually thinking of buying a Toyota, because if you waited until the 3-month mark, they've already made a decision on which brand. Now they're trying to decide the model. So you have to be patient with these things. That's why you want to focus on upper funnel metrics. That's where it all comes from the top down.
I highly second you on that. And for the listeners who want to level up their attribution skill, what do you suggest?
What I suggest is, we actually asked ourselves this question a couple of years ago because of all of the changes in privacy and all of the changes with the marketplaces. We actually put together a free attribution certification course on our website at provalytics.com. It'll take you probably an hour and a half to go through, but what it does is it goes over the past, the present, and what we believe is the future of measurement. And really what that kind of protects you for is this world of marketing is always changing. And we haven't even talked about the impact that AI is going to have on this. Maybe that's for a future discussion, Sebastian. But the idea is that if you're doing something today and it's working for you, and you're at the 6-month mark and it's still working, you are on borrowed time because things move so quickly. And so by having a leveled foundation in terms of measurement, you're going to be better able to see what comes next. So it's on our website. It's under resources for getting attribution certified. That's where I would say to get started at. And if you ever have someone has any questions, you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to speak to anyone. This is kind of my favorite subject.
Great. I will put the link in the show notes as well. Regarding AI, I've taken a lot of questions for AI actually on attribution, but I think we are limited on time as well. So maybe another episode
Absolutely
will be great. And thanks a lot for Jeff for coming down and advising us about all those attribution and everything. Appreciate you giving us all those advice.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Sebastian. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks a lot, Jeff.